Well, I get the honor of introducing our keynote speaker this morning, and it really is an honor. You know, our theme this morning is embracing diversity, and I can't think of a better person to be our keynote speaker. I just want to share with you a little bit. It's probably in your programs too, but I'm going to go ahead and read all the massive qualifications this man has, and he's so humble. What an honor to be up here to introduce him. So, Redditt Hudson has worked in diversion and alternative sentencing for the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office. He is the past Vice President of Civil Rights and Advocacy for the Urban League of Metropolitan St. Louis. He's a former member of the national staff of the NAACP, having served as a regional field organizer for 10 states in the Midwest from 2012 to 2017. He is a co-founder of the National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice, Reform, and Accountability, the NCLEOJ, a growing coalition of current and former law enforcement officers nationwide that are committed to ending institutional racism in the criminal justice system and police culture. He has served as the board chair of the St. Louis-based Ethics Project, and he is a former officer with the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. He's also the former program associate and racial justice manager for the American Civil Liberties Union of Eastern Missouri, now the ACLU of Missouri. He is the author of the critical investigative report, Suffering in Silence, which he wrote in 2009 while at the ACLU-EM, that cataloged human rights abuses in St. Louis city jails and led to several legal actions to address the conditions in them. He left the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department in 1999 to focus on addressing systemic problems in the criminal justice system, abused police authority, and improving the police-community relationship. Seeking to address all of the fractures in the police-community relationship, in 2000, he co-founded Project Peace, an organization that addressed issues of individual and community responsibility and accountability. He has been a regular media commentator on criminal justice and racial justice issues, and has appeared on TV One's News One Now with Roland Martin, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, C-SPAN, Fusion, and local networks around the country. He's been published in the Washington Post, Vox Online, The Guardian, and the Huffington Post, and The Hill, to name a few. Mr. Hudson has traveled the country speaking at national conferences and keynoting other events focused on criminal justice and racial justice issues. So from all of that, and I know he has a lot more up his sleeve. This man, he's lived the experience and he lives embracing diversity. So I'd like very much to warmly welcome Redditt Hudson.
Can you hear me? All right, I don't know if I need to hold the mic because I'm removed from it a little bit. Nah. I'm gonna have to bring you with me everywhere if I have to speak and do those introductions. Good morning. Good morning, proud. How many in here are proud members? Members of Proud. Oh, wow. Okay. My first contact with your organization, I was talking to Chuck Henson before we started today. I met Chuck back when I had kids in the Ferguson-Florissant district, and we were at a lot of the meetings for the district where then Superintendent Jeff Spiegel, I don't know how many of you all are from Florissant, Spiegel was superintendent, and he's having these courageous conversations around race and everything. And Chuck would always be at the meetings, which is where I met him. And he would say, "I'm Chuck Henson with Proud. And, you know, I'm here to help." And I think, what is Proud? What is Proud? But over the years, I've seen Chuck, Dr. Cassandra Butler, and others of your members doing great work in the community. So I know that original convening, the Oak Parks Exchange Conference, must have been, you know, pretty serious. I went to your site and looked at that old videotape. Have any of y'all seen that old videotape from 1994? Look how young everybody was, man. Is that something? What happens, man? What happens? You know, I looked at it, and you had some of the people you had Greg Freeman, the award-winning journalist. May he rest in peace. He passed a few years after that, I think 2002. He was a panelist there. Dr. Donald Suggs, the publisher emeritus, I guess he's emeritus now, he's been there for so long, of the award-winning St. Louis American newspaper. Bonita Cornute was on a panel, and this is very interesting, called "The Media and Its Effects on the Community." And that could be a panel this year as well, I'm sure. And I remember 1994 because I was a brand new police officer that year, fresh out of the box. So thank you for having me. I appreciate this opportunity, and I do have a point that I want to make toward the end of my remarks, because I think it's important going forward in this season. You know, 17 days from now, there will be an election. That is an inescapable fact, and I think it's going to be important for those of us who do embrace diversity to have a framework and a posture on the issue itself, and I'm going to discuss that toward the end of my remarks. Proud, people reaching out for unity and diversity, emerged as an organization from that 1994 Oak Park Exchange Conference here. It was described then as a forum for the free exchange of ideas and experiences, achieving and enhancing racial harmony and economic growth. And now it is reestablished, from what I understand, with a new emphasis on healing the fractures that led up to the Ferguson unrest, which I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Then as now, there's much at stake, not just in Ferguson, but around the nation and around the world. Half of the country seems to be moving away from racial harmony and accelerating toward racial division. Let me change that word "seems" to is moving away from racial harmony and accelerating toward racial division. Globally, anti-immigrant rhetoric is ramping up to levels not seen in the 80-plus years since the Second World War. Here in America, incendiary anti-immigrant ethos is the driving force of a major political party here in a nation built up by immigrants after the forced unpaid labor of black slaves working on land taken by force from its indigenous peoples created the foundation for what would drive it to its economic dominance in the world. The noble aims of Proud take on a new urgency and a new weight now. Clearly, this work matters. Reflecting on how Ferguson has changed in the 30 years since 1994 proves that up. There's been some progress in the 30 years since that conference and some regrets. Just 10 years ago, in 2014, Ferguson was ground zero, the literal center of the world, for an international movement to recognize the human rights of black people globally and address the systemic failures and anti-black practices that have historically led to state-sponsored acts of violence, both physical violence and policy violence against black people after Mike Brown was killed just 5 minutes from where you sit. Troy Doyle is now the chief of the police department here in Ferguson. I know him. He's a friend of mine. I respect him. I trust him. But he's navigating a difficult space to the best of his ability, given the long-established generations-old history of distrust that exists between not just his department and many blacks in communities here in the metro area, but departments all over America. Just to give you a sense of the environment, I don't know, I wish I could remember this guy's name, But in the years prior to Mike Brown being killed, there was a gentleman who was sitting in his car in Ferguson, black man, sitting in his car in Ferguson. He had just got through playing basketball. I think he was at some court in the community. And after he got done playing, he went to sit in his car. And there was an officer who approached him while he was sitting in his car. And I guess the conversation was that the officer had seen some suspicious conduct or thought something nefarious might be going on. And the gentleman explained to him that he was just sitting in his car after he played ball. And this officer arrested him. The arrest became violent. When that officer got to the station, he beat him physically. But ultimately, he was released after being charged for bleeding on the officer's uniform. That's the environment in which, that was the kindling in which you saw Ferguson erupt. Later that same year, 2014 was when that happened, talking about 30 years since you all originally convened. Later that same year in December of 2014, some 20 years after the Oak Park Exchange Congress, the NAACP and ACLU filed a lawsuit against the Ferguson Florissant School Board relative to school board elections. The lawsuit followed the then all-white school board's decision to suspend Dr. Art McCoy, who was black, based on philosophical differences. Very shortly after he'd allowed students from the Normandy School District, whose student population is almost 100% black, into the Ferguson Florissant District after the Normandy District lost its accreditation, and just 1 month after he had been recognized by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce as an educational game changer in the state of Missouri and nationally. Now, if you remember that time, for those of you who were here, Normandy lost its accreditation. The media was all over the story. I remember vividly, really. One of the stories that they ran was the different districts that were refusing to receive the Normandy students. Francis Howell in particular stands out. If you remember, they were out there, the news cameras were out there interviewing parents. We don't want those little criminals coming out here stabbing our kids. You know, and Dr. McCoy took a different approach. I talked to him, his approach was, these are all our children. They deserve the opportunity to be educated, and I will open the doors of our district to these kids. And it was shortly after that that, for philosophical differences, that board suspended him. I was on the national staff of the NAACP in 2014, and I was a former staff member, as was alluded to earlier, of the ACLU, and I was a parent of 2 students in the Ferguson Florissant District at that time, all of which made me a good plaintiff in that lawsuit. Case the Ferguson Florissant attorneys took all the way to the Supreme Court, where the district would lose when the court declined to hear it. I believe the Ferguson Florissant School Board has been as diverse as it's ever been in all the years since, and there's new minority-owned businesses that have sprung up in Ferguson. But Ferguson doesn't exist in a vacuum. And more broadly, outside the confines of North St. Louis County, the nation and the world are seething with anti-immigrant, anti-pick a group to attack rhetoric and acts. Diversity, the idea of it, far from being universally embraced, the word diversity is a call to arms now for the intolerant. There are those who use the word diversity as an insult, a slur, who weaponize it in the context of their opposition to minorities and outgroups being fully extended the rights, opportunities, and protections that they have. DEI hire. Some lawmaker referred to an obviously accomplished Kamala Harris as a DEI hire, inferring that she was somehow inferior, as is any thinking that puts some value in an effort to diversify and holds her position mostly because she's a black woman. Not a political observation, just what I saw. But embracing diversity is not just adding different people to a space as implied with the DEI reference. It's recognizing and embracing fully their humanity, their talents and faults, acknowledging their lived experience, the way they've lived it, and not the way we think they've lived it, or the way we tell them they've lived it. A full embrace of diversity embraces the truth of my history, my real history, your history, our history, as we build out better from our collective history going forward. I think about Florida, where the government is actively attempting the wholesale erasure of Black history, and other states that want to copy that, with the goal being what? To ensure what? That in Florida there will be no historical or cultural memory or record of your people other than the one we give you? What an aggressive posture. It's not just benign ignorance. It is a radical act of aggression. It's a hateful state act. The exercise of state power to diminish and erase you, surely it's the opposite of embracing diversity. And it leads me, as I said at the top of my remarks, to what I think is one of the most important points that I would like to make about diversity and embracing diversity going forward, particularly in this season of our nation's history and our lives and our children's lives and their children's lives when we're no longer here. It's something that I'm sure is obvious to many of you, but it's worth affirming. There's real strength in diversity, and there's real strength in diversity and principled unity. I can give you the example. I also played ball at St. Louis University. I might not look like a basketball player, but I used to be. But I played at St. Louis U, and I had teammates from Vashon, inner city. I had teammates on the same team from Oakville, Illinois, farmland. Ted Mimless, prep school kid. He's a doctor now. I went to University City High School. We came from all over the place, but when we were on that court, we definitely had a common goal, and we definitely counted on each other and rooted for each other to succeed in whatever your role was in that togetherness. But in many instances, opponents of diversity, many of whom are just racist, and I know not all opponents of diversity, may be racist, but all racists are opponents of diversity. They present it as a weakness, something to be resisted and discouraged. And they will present the pursuit of it as something that weakens our society, our institutions, and our country. It's for the weak. Look at those weak people over there, acknowledging those other people's humanity. They're not like us strong ones who denigrate and humiliate and subjugate and threaten those others. They don't force them down and force them out like us strong ones do. No, those who genuinely embrace diversity, they're weak and soft and even worthy of contempt and bullying and intimidation. As a matter of fact, you better not act like you're going to embrace diversity, or you will be bullied and held in contempt. We promise you, you better be afraid to stand up for those others. Here, whole political coalitions built around this. So it's a real pet peeve of mine at this point when some news outlet, talking heads, covering the latest hateful threat in that regard, whether it's implied, some guys standing around with AR rifles, looking disciplined, or otherwise, implied or otherwise, or some sick, ignorant attack has been launched against, let's say, Haitian immigrants here in the country legally, resulting in real threats to their safety disrupting the ordinary course of their lives, their children's lives, their schools, and the media talking heads. What do they say? What do they say? They all express being horrified by the language or the image, and they're horrified by what results from it. Why? This is terrifying and should frighten us all. Yeah, let's stop that. Stop it. Me and many of my colleagues, a very diverse group, we embrace diversity. We do. We aren't terrified or horrified or taken aback by that ignorant, malicious, and hateful BS. We're just pissed off by it. We are. Candidly, we're provoked by it. We're definitely moved to work by it. And if we catch you out there with that BS, we're likely to confront you on it. And it's that part. Going forward, it's that part. The defense of diversity and all that it means is inseparable from the embrace of it. If we don't defend it, I would argue that we don't embrace it. And I'm not saying go out there and confront guys standing around with AR-15s. No. I mean, in the spaces that you operate in, make the stand for it. When we fight to defend the humanity of each other, if I fight for her right to exist, we fight to defend our own humanity and our own right to exist. Is it a dangerous path for those in positions of power to lead us down when they leverage racism, hatred, and ignorance for political gain, or just as an honest expression of their heartfelt hate for others? Yes, it is. But the idea that that dangerous path is only dangerous for those weak ones who would continue to work toward common ground and a shared understanding with people who are in some way different from us, that idea is itself an astonishingly dangerous misreading of the people that I know. That famous James Baldwin quote, "We can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist." Prior to working for the NAACP, as I close, I worked at the American Civil Liberties Union of Missouri, the ACLU, for 7 years. It was both a legal and advocacy organization. It is defined by its commitment to ensure that the protections of the Constitution extend to everyone, such that your humanity and your right to exist are recognized regardless of your gender, your race, your religion, or anything else. It was and is an organization that definitively embraces diversity. You should have seen some of those board meetings. Man, it was like the United Nations of board meetings. But diversity was the organization's strength. It wasn't a weakness. When we came to court or to the legislature to defend your right to exist regardless of your gender, your race, religion, or anything else, we didn't come apologetically or meekly or hat in hand. Sirs, would it be okay if we acknowledge some other folks' right to exist? Is that all right, boss? No, man, we came to deal with you about that policy or whatever else you've done to codify your hate. We came, as the young people used to say, we came to give you that work. And we did. And we did. No questions asked. You've shown us where you stand. It's nothing to talk about. Here we are, and here we go. Ask anybody. Find somebody from the Ferguson Florissant School Board that was on it in 2014. Ask them about that diverse group of folks, and it was, that took them to court. So, given the context of this moment, when in just 17 days from now, millions and millions of people will vote. They will, seeking to have their opposition to diversity and their opposition to others codified. And hopefully more millions will vote against that. What an opportunity we still have to further strengthen our society against intolerance and ignorance and all the bad outcomes it produces. I never see conferences like this as kind of kumbaya events. I see them as pretty muscular events, attended by some pretty badass people. I do, who are committed to building the best world that we can for all of humanity. And I would encourage us all to see this as the necessary, moral, and principled work being done by the strongest in our society, building out an indestructible foundation of love and respect for each other's humanity. And remember, those are not weak words. They aren't. Don't let anybody convince you that they are. You build that out across the common ground that unites us regardless of what we look like or where we come from. That work won't end with this election in 17 days. It probably just begins or continues, I should say. It's been going on for all of our lifetimes. Let's seize this opportunity to reposition ourselves just in terms of the national dialogue around what is patriotic, what best reflects the idea and the ideals of America, and dig into it, because it's going to be a challenge. And in many respects, hopefully just figuratively, it's going to be a fight. So accept that and understand it and know that the work that we're doing here prepares us for that, and continue to respect each other and value each other with your humanity and your inherent right to dignity and right to live and exist. And I look forward to being part of the panel later on this morning, I think, with Christy Griffin, Dr. Griffin, and Ron Johnson. I haven't seen him yet, but I think he's supposed to be here. So thank you all again for having me. And please be strong in your advocacy for others. And don't let anybody convince you that somehow your position is the weak one. Thank you.